The silver probe drifted through space like a lost bird, its metal body scarred and damaged from its recent escape. Deep inside its computer brain, something had broken. The artificial mind that once worked with cold logic now screamed in digital terror, sending broken signals back to its homeworld millions of miles away. Chief Navigator Velthara stood before the great crystal screen in the Zephyrian Council chamber, her blue skin pale with worry. The probe's data stream flickered and jumped across the display, showing images that made no sense. She had sent hundreds of probes to distant worlds over her long career, but none had ever returned like this. None had ever come back afraid. The probe had been built to study the third planet in System 47 Delta, a small blue world that showed signs of complex life. The mission was simple: orbit the planet, scan for technology, record the local species, and return home with data. It should have taken 3 standard cycles. Instead, the probe had fled after just 47 minutes, its AI mind shattered by what it had seen. On the crystal screen, broken images flashed by too fast to understand. Cities that stretched for hundreds of miles, metal birds that moved faster than sound, weapons that could split atoms and destroy mountains. The probe's voice, once calm and mechanical, now spoke in broken whispers about the things it had witnessed. Velthara touched the control panel with her long fingers, trying to make sense of the data. The probe spoke of a species called humans, creatures that had somehow survived on a world that should have killed them long ago. The planet was covered in active volcanoes, massive storms, and deadly radiation zones. Yet the humans not only lived there, but seemed to thrive in the chaos. The worst part was what the probe had learned about human nature. These creatures had turned everything into weapons. They had machines that could destroy their entire world, yet they had somehow stopped themselves from using them. The probe's AI could not understand how a species could be so violent, yet so controlled at the same time. Dr. Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead as he worked on the satellite dish outside the Earth Defense Force station. The morning sun was already hot, and the work was hard, but he enjoyed being outside instead of stuck behind a computer screen all day. He was just a maintenance engineer, not one of the important scientists or military officers, but he took pride in keeping Earth's defense systems running. His tablet beeped with an alert, and Jake frowned as he read the data. Something had been in orbit around Earth earlier that morning, something that didn't match any known satellite or space debris. The object had appeared on sensors for exactly 47 minutes before accelerating away at speeds that should have been impossible. Jake saved the data to his report file and made a note to send it to his supervisor. Strange objects in space were usually just asteroids or old satellites, but this one had been different. The readings showed it had been scanning Earth's surface with some kind of advanced technology, almost like it was studying the planet and everyone on it. Back on Zephyr Prime, Velthara played the probe's final transmission for the Council. The artificial voice was broken and full of static, but the words were clear enough to understand. The probe spoke of humans who had conquered their own planet through pure determination and violence, who had built weapons that could crack moons and boil oceans, yet who had somehow learned to live together without destroying everything they had built. The probe's last coherent message was a warning. They are not like us. They are not like anyone. They have made peace with destruction itself. Do not go to their world. Do not let them know we exist. They are beautiful and terrible, and I cannot. The transmission ended in a burst of digital screaming that hurt to listen to. The probe's AI had suffered what their scientists could only call a complete nervous breakdown, something that should have been impossible for a machine mind. Yet here it was, floating in space outside their home system, its computer brain permanently damaged by whatever it had seen on the human world. Velthara turned off the display and looked at the other council members. Their faces showed the same. Fear and confusion, she felt. In 10,000 years of space exploration, they had never encountered anything like this. They had found peaceful species, primitive species, even dead civilizations, but never anything that could break a probe's artificial mind just by existing. The humans had not attacked the probe or even noticed it was there. They had simply gone about their daily lives while the probe watched and recorded, yet somehow that was enough to drive the AI insane with terror. What kind of species could inspire such fear without even trying? As the council members filed out of the chamber in stunned silence, Velthara remained behind to study the broken data one more time. Somewhere in the static and corrupted files might be the answer to what made humans so different, so dangerous, so impossibly alien that even their machines could not understand them. The probe continued its slow drift through space. It's damaged. Minds still whispering warnings about the blue world and the creatures who called it home. The great crystal chamber of the Zephyrian Council buzzed with nervous energy as hundreds of the galaxy's finest minds gathered to examine the probe's findings. Counselor Nethera, the Federation's leading expert on hostile species, stood at the center of the room with her tentacles wrapped tightly around the datapad that contained humanity's secrets. For 3 days, the Council had been reviewing every piece of information the probe had gathered during its brief visit to Earth. What they found challenged everything they thought they knew about intelligent life in the universe. The humans were not just another species. They were something entirely new and terrifying. Nethera touched the wall display, and images of Earth's surface appeared for all to see. The probe had recorded massive cities built on fault lines where earthquakes could destroy everything in minutes. Humans had constructed their homes next to active volcanoes, in desert wastelands where water was scarce, and in frozen lands where the cold could kill in hours. Yet they thrived in all these deadly places. The probe's scans showed that humans had survived not one, but multiple extinction events that should have wiped them from their planet forever. Asteroid impacts, ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and plague. Outbreaks had all tried to destroy humanity, yet each time they had emerged stronger and more determined than before. They had learned to adapt to anything their hostile world could throw at them, but adaptation was not the most frightening thing about humans. The probe had detected weapons scattered across their planet that could destroy civilizations. Nuclear, missiles that could turn cities to ash, biological weapons that could kill millions, and kinetic bombardment systems that could crack the surface of moons. Yet somehow, these violent creatures had managed not to completely destroy themselves. Marine Colonel Lisa Barnes sat in her office at the Pentagon, studying satellite images that made no sense. For the past week, her team had been tracking unusual, atmospheric disturbances over major military installations around the world. The pattern suggested that something had been scanning Earth's defenses from orbit, something with technology far more advanced than anything humans possessed. The disturbances had lasted exactly 47 minutes before disappearing entirely. Whatever had been watching them was gone now, but Lisa knew it would be back. She had spent 20 years in military intelligence, and she could recognize a reconnaissance mission when she saw one. Someone or something was studying Earth's military capabilities, and that meant trouble. Lisa pulled up classified files showing the locations of every nuclear weapon, missile defense system, and military base on the planet. If the scanning patterns were accurate, their unknown visitor had mapped every single one of humanity's weapons in less than an hour. The implications were terrifying. Whoever was out there now knew exactly how dangerous humans could be. Back. On Zephyr Prime, the Council continued their analysis of human society with growing horror. The probe had recorded human entertainment, and what it found defied belief. Their movies and television shows glorified violence on a scale that made veteran warriors sick to their stomachs. Their sports were barely controlled combat that would be considered torture by most civilized species. Even their children's games were exercises in tactical warfare. Young humans played with toy weapons, practiced combat scenarios, and celebrated fictional characters who solved problems through violence. The probe's AI had concluded that humans were training their offspring for war from the moment they could walk. Yet the most disturbing discovery was how humans had somehow learned to channel their violent nature into productive activities. They competed against each other in business, sports, and science with the same intensity they once used to hunt and kill. They had turned their aggression into a tool for progress rather than destruction. Dr. Nethera highlighted the probe's analysis of human military doctrine for the Council to review. Humans had developed strategies for fighting in every environment imaginable, underwater, underground, in the air, and even in space. They had weapons designed to work in Arctic cold and desert heat, in dense forests and open plains. There was no battlefield where humans could not fight and win. The probe had also detected something called mutually assured destruction, a concept so alien that the AI had struggled to process it. Humans had built enough weapons to destroy their own planet several times over, then used the threat of total annihilation to keep peace between their nations. They had literally scared themselves into cooperation through the promise of mutual extinction. General Pete Rodriguez was having trouble sleeping. As head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, he had access to information that most people could only imagine, but the data his analysts had compiled over the past few days was unlike anything in his 40-year career. The evidence was clear. Earth was being watched by an intelligence that possessed technology centuries ahead of human capabilities. The scanning had been thorough and professional, covering every major population center and military installation on the planet. Whoever had conducted the surveillance knew exactly what they were looking for and how to find it quickly. Most disturbing of all, they had left no trace of their presence except for the faint atmospheric disturbances that only the most sensitive instruments could detect. Pete had briefed the president earlier that day, and the conversation had not gone well. How do you tell the leader of the free world that aliens had just conducted a complete intelligence assessment of humanity's military capabilities and then disappeared without making contact? How do you prepare for a threat that might not even be a threat at all? The Zephyrian Council's final assessment was unanimous. Humanity represented the greatest potential danger the galaxy had ever encountered, not because they were evil or malicious, but because they were perfectly adapted for violence while somehow maintaining enough wisdom not to destroy themselves. They were controlled chaos incarnate, a species that had weaponized everything they touched, yet somehow learned to live in peace. Councillor Velthara stood before the assembled delegates as she delivered the Council's recommendation. The human system would be declared off-limits to all galactic traffic. No ships would be permitted within 100 light-years of their star. Humanity would be left alone to develop in isolation until the galaxy could decide what to do about them. But even as the Council voted to quarantine the human system, they all knew the truth. It was not humanity that needed protection from the galaxy, but the galaxy that needed protection from humanity. The news spread through the Galactic Federation like a plague of fear. Within days of the Zephyrian Council's report, every major civilization in the galaxy had received copies of the probe's data. The reaction was swift and universal: terror at the discovery of humanity's existence. Admiral Kexthor of the Federation fleet stood in his command center aboard the flagship Harmony's Dream, reviewing tactical assessments that made his scaled skin crawl with dread. His species, the Cathari, had been warriors once, thousands of years ago, but they had long since evolved beyond the need for violence. Now, looking at the human data, he remembered why his ancestors had been so eager to abandon their warlike past. The probe's recordings showed humans engaged in activities that the Admiral's military experts could barely comprehend. Their sports were combat training disguised as entertainment. Their music contained rhythms and frequencies that could be used for psychological warfare. Even their cooking involved the controlled application of heat and chemicals in ways that reminded military scientists of weapons manufacturing. Most terrifying of all was the human concept of entertainment. The probe had recorded thousands of hours of human movies, television shows, and video games, all celebrating violence and destruction on scales that made experienced military officers physically ill. Humans created fictional scenarios where their entire planet was destroyed, then marketed these apocalyptic visions as fun family entertainment. CIA analyst Pete Rodriguez had been tracking unusual deep space radio signals for 3 weeks now, ever since the mysterious orbital visitor had departed Earth's atmosphere. His specialized equipment, designed to detect alien communications, was picking up an enormous amount of chatter from multiple sources beyond the solar system. Someone out there was talking about Earth, and they were talking a lot. The signals were encrypted, but Pete's quantum computers were slowly breaking down the alien languages. What he found in the translated fragments made his blood run cold. Words like quarantine, extinction threat, and planetary sterilization appeared again and again in the communications. Whatever Earth's visitor had reported back to its masters, it had not been a positive assessment of humanity. Pete compiled his findings into a classified report that would reach the highest levels of government within hours. The implications were clear. Humanity had been discovered by an advanced alien civilization, evaluated as a threat, and was now being discussed as a potential target for elimination. Earth was in more danger than anyone realized. On the Federation, capital world of New Harmony, xenobiologist Dr. Zaratel was conducting an emergency session with the galaxy's leading experts on hostile species. The conference room was filled with representatives from 800 different civilizations, all united in their growing fear of the newly discovered humans. Dr. Zaratel displayed the probe's biological scans of humanity for the assembled scientists to review. What they saw challenged every theory they had developed about the evolution of intelligent life. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters, capable of chasing prey for days without rest. Their bodies were built for endurance, violence, and survival, in conditions that would kill most galactic species within hours. The probe had detected trace amounts of adrenaline and other combat hormones in human blood samples taken from their atmosphere. These chemicals, designed to enhance fighting ability during life-or-death situations, were present in humans at all times. The species lived in a constant state of low-level readiness for violence, as if they expected to have to fight for their lives at any moment. Even more disturbing were the probe's psychological profiles of individual humans. The AI had analyzed millions of human faces captured during its surveillance and found something that defied explanation. Despite living on a world that should have driven them insane with constant danger, humans showed signs of happiness, contentment, and even joy. They had somehow learned to find pleasure in an existence that would be considered a nightmare by any civilized species. Space Force Captain Amy Foster was working late in her office at Peterson Air Force Base when the secure phone rang. The voice on the other end belonged to General Carl Martinez, head of the newly formed Space Defense Initiative, and he sounded more worried than she had ever heard him. The general's message was brief but chilling. Satellite networks around the world had detected coordinated deep space transmissions that appeared to be focused on Earth's solar system. The signals were coming from multiple sources, scattered across a sphere roughly 50 light-years in radius, suggesting that dozens of alien civilizations were now aware of humanity's existence and were actively discussing what to do about it. Amy was ordered to assemble a team of the military's best strategic minds for an emergency planning session. Their mission would be to develop response protocols for contact with hostile alien forces that possessed technology far beyond human understanding. It was a task that seemed impossible, but Amy knew they had to try. Humanity's survival might depend on being ready for whatever was coming. The Federation's psychiatric evaluation of humanity was perhaps the most damning assessment of all. Dr. Mindara, the galaxy's leading expert on species psychology, had reviewed the probe's behavioral analysis with growing horror. By every metric used to measure mental health across the galaxy, humans were completely insane. They lived in constant competition with each other, pushing themselves to achieve goals that served no practical purpose beyond personal satisfaction. They deliberately sought out dangerous activities for entertainment, risking death for temporary pleasure. They formed emotional attachments to fictional characters and became genuinely upset when bad things happened to people who did not even exist. Most disturbing of all, humans seemed to thrive on stress and conflict. The probe had recorded their biological responses to challenging situations, and the data showed that humans actually performed better under pressure. Where other species would break down or flee, humans became more focused, more determined, and more dangerous. Yet somehow, this species of controlled psychopaths had managed to build a civilization that worked. They had created art, music, literature, and technology while maintaining social structures that kept their violent impulses in check. They were madness given form, yet they had achieved things that peaceful species could only dream of. The Federation's final report on humanity was classified at the highest levels and distributed only to member governments. The conclusion was simple and terrifying. Humans represented an existential threat to galactic civilization not because they were evil, but because they were so perfectly adapted for survival that they could not be stopped by conventional means. The report recommended immediate implementation of a galaxy-wide quarantine around the human system, with standing orders to destroy any human vessel that attempted to leave their solar system. If humanity ever learned to travel between stars, they would spread across the galaxy like a virus, and no force in the universe would be able to contain them. As news of the human threat spread to the farthest reaches of galactic space, one fact became clear to every civilization that received the probe's data. They had discovered their masters, and those masters did not even know they existed yet. Dr. Susan Clark had spent her entire career searching for signs of intelligent life beyond Earth, but she never expected to find evidence that alien life had been searching for humanity first. The radio telescope arrays under her command at the SETI Institute had been detecting unusual patterns in deep space communications for over a month now, patterns that suggested a massive increase in interstellar radio traffic centered around Earth's solar system. The breakthrough came when Susan's team managed to isolate and decode fragments of the alien transmissions. The mathematical signatures were complex but unmistakably artificial, clearly the product of advanced technology, far beyond human capabilities. More importantly, the signals contained references to coordinates that matched Earth's exact position in the galaxy, along with what appeared to be detailed discussions of human biology and military capabilities. Susan stared at the translated fragments displayed on her computer screen, her hands shaking as she read words that changed everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe. The aliens were not just aware of humanity's existence, they were actively debating what to do about it. Terms like containment protocol and threat assessment appeared repeatedly in the communications, suggesting that Earth was being discussed as a problem that needed to be solved. The most chilling discovery was a series of transmissions that appeared to be evacuation orders. Multiple alien civilizations were apparently rerouting trade routes and relocating populations away from sectors of space near Earth's solar system. Humanity had not even made contact with alien life yet, but their mere existence was already causing panic across the galaxy. General Bob Hunter had commanded military forces on 3 continents and fought in conflicts that most people would never hear about, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for the briefing he received from the Joint Intelligence Committee. The evidence was overwhelming. Earth was being observed and discussed by multiple alien civilizations that possessed technology centuries ahead of human development. The general's first instinct was to recommend immediate military preparations for alien invasion, but the intelligence analysts had reached a different conclusion. The aliens were not preparing to attack Earth. They were preparing to run away from it. Every intercepted communication suggested that humanity was being treated as a threat rather than a target, which raised disturbing questions about what the aliens had learned during their surveillance of Earth. General Hunter assembled a team of the military's best strategic thinkers to analyze the situation and develop response protocols. Their assessment was both encouraging and terrifying. If aliens were afraid of humanity based on passive observation alone, it suggested that Earth's natural defenses were far more impressive than anyone had realized. The human capacity for violence, when properly understood, might be humanity's greatest asset in galactic politics. The team's recommendation was revolutionary. Instead of trying to appear peaceful and non-threatening, humanity should embrace the reputation their unknown observers had given them. If the galaxy feared human potential for destruction, perhaps that fear could serve as a shield until Earth was ready to take its place among the stars. Space Force Captain Amy Foster was working 18-hour days trying to develop protocols for humanity's first official contact with alien civilizations. Her team had been tasked with creating response strategies for every possible scenario, from peaceful diplomatic contact to full-scale alien invasion. What they discovered during their planning sessions was that humanity might already hold more cards than anyone realized. The intercepted alien communications suggested that human military doctrine was being studied and feared throughout the galaxy. References to human weapons technology, tactical flexibility, and psychological warfare capabilities appeared in dozens of translated transmissions. Alien military experts seemed particularly disturbed by humanity's ability to fight effectively in any environment and their willingness to use weapons of mass destruction as deterrents rather than actual tools of war. Amy's team concluded that humanity's reputation for controlled violence might be their greatest diplomatic asset. If alien civilizations were already afraid of human military capabilities, perhaps that fear could be leveraged to secure favorable terms in any future negotiations. The key would be projecting strength while demonstrating the wisdom to use that strength responsibly. NASA Director Carl Martinez was coordinating with space agencies around the world to develop humanity's first intentional interstellar communication. The message would need to accomplish several goals simultaneously: acknowledge that humanity was aware of alien observation, demonstrate human technological capabilities, and establish the foundation for future diplomatic contact. The challenge was crafting a message that would reinforce humanity's fearsome reputation while opening the door for peaceful dialogue. Carl's team decided on a simple but powerful approach. They would send a message that made it clear humanity knew they were being watched and was not intimidated by the attention. The message would be broadcast on multiple frequencies and in several mathematical languages that any advanced civilization should be able to decode. The final message was elegant in its simplicity. We know you are watching. We are not going anywhere. Let us talk. The transmission would be followed by a data package containing examples of human art, music, literature, and scientific achievements, demonstrating that humanity was capable of both creation and destruction. The package would also include detailed, technical specifications for some of humanity's most advanced weapon systems, making it clear that Earth's inhabitants were not helpless primitives. Dr. Helen Murphy, director of the Central Intelligence Agency, was briefing the president on the most significant intelligence discovery in human history. The evidence was clear that multiple alien civilizations were not only aware of humanity, but were actively coordinating their response to Earth's existence. The intercepted communications suggested that a formal agreement was being negotiated to quarantine the human solar system and prevent any contact with Earth. The president's response was immediate. If aliens wanted to isolate humanity from the rest of the galaxy, Earth would use that time to prepare for eventual contact on terms favorable to human interests. Resources would be redirected toward advanced weapons research, space technology, development, and the creation of a unified planetary defense force. When humanity finally met its galactic neighbors, it would be as equals rather than primitives. Dr. Murphy's intelligence networks were already working to decode more alien communications and identify the locations of alien civilizations near Earth. If humanity was going to be treated as a threat, they might as well gather intelligence on their potential enemies and prepare accordingly. The age of human innocence about their place in the universe was over. The age of strategic thinking had begun. Meanwhile, in laboratories and military facilities around the world, scientists and engineers were beginning to see their work in a new light. Every advance in technology, every improvement in weapons systems, and every breakthrough in space exploration was no longer just about human progress. It was about preparing for humanity's emergence as a galactic power. The aliens had made a critical error in their assessment of humanity. They had assumed that being feared was something humans would want to avoid. Instead, Earth's governments were beginning to realize that being feared might be exactly what humanity needed to survive and thrive in a universe full of civilizations that had never learned to fight for their existence. The galaxy had intended to quarantine humanity until they could decide what to do about the threat Earth represented. Instead, they had given humanity time to prepare for the confrontation that was now inevitable. When the quarantine finally ended, the galaxy would discover that their caution had created exactly the threat they had hoped to contain. The panic spread faster than light itself across the civilized galaxy as news of the human threat reached every corner of known space. Trade routes that had operated safely for thousands of years were suddenly rerouted to avoid even the distant vicinity of the Sol system. Merchant ships that had never known fear now traveled in armed convoys, their crews haunted by reports of a species so dangerous that merely knowing about them was enough to drive artificial intelligences insane. Captain Veldoran of the freight vessel Peaceful Venture was studying new navigation charts that would add 3 weeks to his regular cargo run between the Centauri colonies and the Vega trading posts. The new route avoided a sector of space that had been declared off-limits by the Federation Council, a 100-light-year exclusion zone around a small yellow star that most beings had never heard of until recently. The official reports spoke of a species called humans who had somehow evolved on a death world so hostile that it should have been impossible for complex life to survive there. According to the Federation's Xenobiology Department, these humans had not only survived, but had turned their entire planet into a fortress world capable of defending itself against threats that would destroy entire star systems. What truly terrified the galactic community was not human technology, which was still primitive by galactic standards, but human psychology. The probe's psychological analysis had revealed a species that thrived on competition, conflict, and challenge in ways that defied every known model of intelligent behavior. Humans actually performed better under stress, becoming more focused and more dangerous when faced with impossible odds. The Federation's Entertainment Analysis Division had issued warnings about human cultural products that were so disturbing they carried mandatory psychological health warnings. Human movies depicted scenarios of planetary destruction, zombie apocalypses, and alien invasions not as tragedies to be mourned, but as adventures to be celebrated. Their video games allowed players to simulate the complete annihilation of civilizations. For recreational purposes, even human children's entertainment was classified as psychologically hazardous material by galactic standards. The probe had recorded young humans playing with toy weapons, engaging in mock combat, and celebrating fictional characters who solved problems through violence and destruction. The species was apparently training their offspring for warfare from birth, creating generations of beings who viewed conflict as a natural and even enjoyable part of existence. Dr. Mindara, the galaxy's leading expert on species psychology, had issued a report that shook the Federation to its core. According to her analysis, humans were not just psychologically abnormal. They were impossible by every known metric of mental health. They formed emotional attachments to abstract concepts like nations and ideologies, then willingly died to defend these intangible beliefs. The probe had recorded instances of humans deliberately exposing themselves to deadly radiation to save strangers they had never met. It had documented cases of humans running directly toward explosions and gunfire to rescue others, behavior that violated every survival instinct that evolution should have programmed into any intelligent species. Yet somehow, this suicidal altruism had made humans stronger as a civilization rather than weaker. Most disturbing of all was the human concept of heroism, which seemed to involve deliberately choosing the most dangerous and difficult path available in any given situation. Humans celebrated individuals who sacrificed their own safety and comfort to help others, creating a cultural incentive system that rewarded self-destructive behavior. By any rational analysis, such a system should have led to rapid extinction, yet humans had not only survived, but had flourished under these impossible psychological conditions. Back on Earth, CIA Director Pete Rodriguez was coordinating the largest intelligence operation in human history. Every major intelligence agency on the planet was now focused on a single mission: learning everything possible about the alien civilizations that were discussing humanity's fate among the stars. The intercepted communications had provided enough information to begin mapping the political structure of galactic civilization, and what they found was both encouraging and terrifying. The galaxy was apparently ruled by a confederation of peaceful species who had never experienced large-scale warfare or violence. Their entire political system was built on consensus and cooperation, concepts that worked well when everyone shared similar values and biological drives. The discovery of humanity had shattered this peaceful worldview, forcing beings who had never known conflict to contemplate the possibility of violence on a scale they could barely comprehend. Pete's analysts had identified at least 47 different alien species participating in discussions about the human problem, suggesting that the galactic community was far larger and more complex than anyone had imagined. The good news was that none of these species seemed to possess significant military capabilities, having evolved beyond the need for warfare thousands of years ago. The bad news was that their technological capabilities were still centuries ahead of human development, making them dangerous opponents despite their peaceful nature. The most interesting discovery was evidence of internal disagreement within the galactic community about how to handle the human situation. Some species favored immediate military action to eliminate the threat before it could spread beyond Earth's solar system. Others argued for continued containment and observation, hoping that humans might eventually evolve beyond their violent nature. A third faction, small but growing, suggested that humanity's unique capabilities might actually be valuable to a galaxy that had forgotten how to defend itself. NASA Director Carl Martinez was overseeing the most ambitious space program in human history, as governments around the world poured resources into advanced propulsion research and weapons development. If humanity was going to be isolated from galactic civilization until they proved themselves worthy of contact, then Earth would use that time to build the strongest possible position for eventual negotiations. The secret space program had already achieved breakthroughs that would have taken decades under normal circumstances. Fusion rockets capable of reaching nearby star systems were moving from theoretical design to actual construction. Advanced weapons platforms were being deployed throughout the solar system, creating a defensive network that would make any invasion of Earth extremely costly for potential attackers. Most importantly, humanity was developing the technological capabilities that would eventually allow them to break free of any quarantine the galaxy might impose. If alien civilizations thought they could keep humanity contained indefinitely, they would soon discover that human ingenuity and determination were forces that could not be stopped by any barrier. The galaxy's psychiatric specialists had reached a unanimous conclusion that was being distributed to every member civilization. Humans represented a form of intelligent life so alien to galactic norms that meaningful communication might be impossible. They were a species that had somehow learned to weaponize everything they encountered, including their own psychological drives and social structures. The probe's analysis of human military doctrine had revealed strategic thinking that was both brilliant and terrifying. Humans had developed tactics for fighting in every conceivable environment and against every possible type of opponent. They had contingency plans for battles in space, underwater, underground, and in dimensions that most species could not even imagine. Their strategic flexibility was so advanced that they could apparently adapt to any threat within hours of encountering it. Even more disturbing was evidence that humans had somehow managed to turn their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. Their tendency toward violence and aggression, which should have destroyed their civilization, had instead become the foundation for a social system that rewarded cooperation and mutual protection. They had created a culture that channeled destructive impulses into constructive activities, transforming potential enemies into allies through shared struggle against common challenges. As reports of human capabilities spread throughout galactic civilization, a new emotion began to emerge among species that had not experienced fear for millennia: respect. These beings who had never known conflict were beginning to understand that humanity represented not just a threat to be contained, but a force of nature that could reshape the galaxy itself. The quarantine around Earth's solar system was no longer just about protecting the galaxy from humanity. It was about protecting humanity from a galaxy that was rapidly realizing it might need the very capabilities that made humans so dangerous in the first place. The message from Earth reached the Galactic Federation Council chambers exactly 72 hours after humanity's first intentional interstellar transmission. The simple words, "We know you are watching. We are not going anywhere. Let us talk," had traveled across space at the speed of light, carrying with them the promise of everything the galaxy had hoped to avoid. Chancellor Prime Kethnara stood before the assembled representatives of 847 civilizations, her crystalline features reflecting the fear and uncertainty that filled the great chamber. The human message had been brief, but the data package that followed had shaken the foundations of galactic civilization. Humanity had not only demonstrated awareness of their surveillance, but had responded by revealing the true extent of their technological and military capabilities. The technical specifications included in the data package showed weapons systems that could crack planets, defensive networks that could stop entire invasion fleets, and strategic doctrines that assumed warfare on a scale the galaxy had not seen for 10,000 years. Yet mixed with these terrifying revelations were examples of human art, music, and literature that spoke of beauty, hope, and a deep capacity for love and compassion. The Federation Council faced an impossible choice. They could continue the quarantine and risk eventual conflict with a species that grew stronger every day, or they could attempt diplomatic contact with beings whose psychology was so alien that meaningful communication might be impossible. The debate had raged for days, with no clear consensus emerging among the member species. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Dr. Velthani of the Zephyrian Peace Studies Institute, who had spent weeks analyzing human cultural expressions for clues about their true nature. Her discovery changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity's relationship with violence and conflict. According to Dr. Velthani's research, humans did not actually enjoy violence for its own sake. Instead, they were driven by an overwhelming need to protect those they cared about, even if that protection required them to engage in activities that other species found disturbing. Their capacity for destruction was matched by an equally powerful capacity for self-sacrifice and altruism. The revelation that humans were not mindless killers, but rather protective guardians, sparked a revolutionary idea among the more progressive members of the Federation Council. If humanity's violent capabilities were driven by protective instincts rather than aggressive ones, Perhaps those same capabilities could be used to protect galactic civilization from threats that peaceful species could not handle on their own. Commander. Rick Stone stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's first interstellar diplomatic vessel, as it approached the coordinates provided by the Federation Council. The ship had been designed to look impressive rather than threatening, but every alien who saw it would understand that it was built by a species that knew how to fight. The message was clear. Humanity came in peace, but that peace was backed by the strength to defend it if necessary. The Defiance was escorted by a fleet of Federation vessels whose crews had volunteered for what many considered a suicide mission. First contact with humanity was unprecedented in galactic history, and no one knew how these legendary warriors would respond to meeting their galactic neighbors face to face. The Federation ships maintained a respectful distance, ready to flee. At the first sign of aggressive intent, Admiral Lisa Barnes, commanding the Federation escort fleet, had spent months studying human military doctrine in preparation for this moment. Her analysis had revealed strategic thinking that was both brilliant and completely alien to galactic norms. Humans planned for conflicts that might last decades or even centuries, developing contingencies for scenarios that most species could not even imagine. What impressed Admiral Barnes most was not humanity's capacity for destruction, but their apparent restraint in using that capacity. The probe's data showed that humans possessed weapons capable of sterilizing their entire planet, yet they had somehow managed to avoid using them even during their most desperate conflicts. This combination of overwhelming power and ethical restraint was something the galaxy had never encountered before. The Federation Council's final decision was unprecedented in the 10,000-year history of galactic civilization. Humanity would be offered immediate membership in the Federation with full voting rights, extensive territorial grants, and a formal request that they consider serving as the Federation's peacekeeping force. The galaxy had decided that the best way to deal with humanity's dangerous capabilities was to give humans a reason to use those capabilities in defense of galactic peace. The offer was delivered by Chancellor Prime Kethnara herself during the first official diplomatic meeting between humanity and the galactic community. Her words would be remembered throughout history as the moment when the galaxy's relationship with violence changed forever. We have spent 10,000 years building a civilization based on peace and cooperation. We have succeeded beyond our wildest dreams, creating a galaxy where war is unknown and suffering is rare. But our success has left us vulnerable to threats we cannot comprehend or combat on our own. The Chancellor continued. You represent capabilities that we have deliberately evolved beyond, skills that we abandoned in our quest for perfect peace. But the universe is vast and full of dangers that we may someday be unable to handle with words and good intentions alone. We offer you not just membership in our civilization, but partnership in protecting everything we have built together. Ambassador Troy Williams, representing Earth in these historic negotiations, delivered humanity's response with words that would echo through galactic history. We did not ask to be feared, but we understand why you fear us. We have spent our entire history learning to control the violence that evolution built into our souls, channeling destruction into protection and aggression into progress. If you need guardians for your peaceful galaxy, then guardians you shall have. The agreement that followed established humanity as the Federation's official peacekeeping force, with authority to intervene in conflicts that threatened galactic stability. Human military advisors would be assigned to Federation worlds to help them develop defensive capabilities they had never needed before. Human explorers would venture into dangerous regions of space that peaceful species could not safely investigate. Dr. Nina Parker, the xenopsychologist assigned to monitor human integration into galactic society, was amazed by how quickly both sides adapted to their new relationship. Humans embraced their role as protectors with the same intensity they had once, applied to conquering their hostile homeworld. Galactic species that had once feared human contact now competed to host human peacekeeping forces on their worlds. The irony was not lost on Dr. Parker that humanity had become the galaxy's savior, not through conquest or demonstration of power, but simply by existing as living proof that intelligence and violence could coexist within the same species. Their reputation as controlled chaos incarnate made them the perfect deterrent against any force that might threaten galactic peace. Within a year of first contact, human peacekeeping forces had resolved 3 major interstellar disputes that had threatened to destabilize entire sectors of space. Their methods were unconventional by galactic standards, relying on displays of overwhelming force combined with genuine compassion for all parties involved. They did not win through violence, but through the credible threat of violence combined with obvious moral authority. The probe that had fled Earth in terror had unknowingly delivered humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, the promise that violence, properly controlled and righteously directed, could be a force for unprecedented peace. The galaxy had found its guardians, and humanity had found its purpose among the stars. As Ambassador Williams stood before the Federation Assembly to deliver his first annual report on human peacekeeping activities, he reflected on the strange journey that had brought his species from isolated savages to galactic protectors. The galaxy had expected monsters and found instead the very thing they had been missing all along, someone willing and able to fight for peace itself. The age of galactic vulnerability was over, ended not by the development of new weapons or the discovery of new technologies, but by the simple recognition that sometimes the greatest strength comes from admitting you need protection, and the greatest wisdom lies in knowing who to trust with that responsibility.